Welcome to One on One. I am Cyril Stober. Now, information management is easily described as a process of collecting, storing, retrieving, using information, and creating systems to manage information as a resource for appropriate purposes. Now, applying this to information in a diverse and complex society such as Nigeria's is by no means simple. Today, I sit with one who has gone down that lane of information management at a national level. My guest is Alhaji Mohammed, a former Minister of Information and Culture of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cyril. It's a pleasure.
It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Right. We talk about information management. Let me start by asking you this. You have managed information at the very top level. How easy is it to do that?
Well, Cyril, it's not very easy. And I think I come from a unique background. For 10 years, I was the opposition spokesperson for AC, for ACN, and later for APC. And then later I became a Minister of Information and Culture. So I've been spokesperson for the opposition, and I've been spokesperson for the government, and actually back to back. So yes, there are two different strokes. Managing information for government is an art. And I think the purpose of writing this book actually is to let you know, let Nigerians know, and learn what it is to manage information for government.
All right.
Because managing information for government is about accuracy. It's about adding context. It's about understanding the nuances. It's also about that ability to communicate government to the people and the people to government.
All right.
And take back the feedback to government.
Okay. Talking about a book, we'll come to the book as we go on with this conversation. You've written a book, but let me ask this. Your background as a lawyer, how did that place you in good stead to manage information at these various levels, particularly government information?
Thank you, Cyril. Yes, I'm a lawyer, but people forget that my first degree was in French, and that for the first 10 years of my professional life post-university, I was actually the public relations officer and manager for what is today Federal Airports Authority. So I actually cut my teeth in information management as far back as 1978-79. And I was on that beat until when I left in 1986. So really, I've never been very far away from information management.
All right. You've spent a long time in it. And now you have put pen to paper and put your thoughts down. We would see your name on a dust jacket that speaks of many things. You've decided to call these headlines and sound bites, media moments that defined an administration. Very interesting title for a book, particularly the bit about headlines and sound bites. You're no stranger to headlines and sound bites, are you?
No, not at all. Cyril, actually this book is my own personal effort to write Nigeria's contemporary history from the viewpoint of the longest serving Minister of Information and Culture in the history of this country. For 8 years, Cyril, I was privileged to be in the center, in the engine room of government communications. of crisis management, of national orientation, of tourism, and of culture. Those 8 years gave me a vantage position to be at the table where decisions are being made, where narratives are being shaped, and where, more often than not, misinformation will overshadow the facts. So as a Minister of Information and Culture, your major role is to ensure that facts are given, to ensure that there's no misconception, and where necessary to provide the historical context, which we must never forget, which is always very important. Now, really, this book is more about what goes behind the headlines. What goes behind the sound bites? Headline: Nigeria suspends Twitter operations. Yes, that is the headline. But what happened? How were those decisions taken? That is what you find in this book. So, yes, headlines, sound bites, but behind those headlines and sound bites are government policies, are narratives, and also you have this constant struggle between the government and the opposition also.
Where do the people fit in all of this? I mean, Nigeria is such a diverse country. Culture was under your purview as minister. We have our various cultures. Tourism was also under your purview. And national orientation was as well. A lot has been said about the orientation of the people. So bringing all of this and managing information, you talk about behind the scenes. Some of those decisions would have taken a lot to arrive at, and sometimes not to the benefit of all. So how do you manage that kind of information and putting it out to the public?
Thank you, Cyril. About this time last week, yes, I delivered a paper to the mass communications students of the Yaba College of Technology. And the theme of the paper was government communication in the intersection of policy, media, and society. Now, in governance and in communication, people, society is actually the center. It's at the center of it. And that's why I said, for a government communicator, you must be able to leverage strategic initiatives that will allow you to communicate government to the people and get feedback from the people. And also now go back to government and say, this is what people are thinking, this is what they are saying. And when you read this book, you see a lot of that. Because in my time, we held 21 town hall meetings. And probably, but for COVID-19, would have done much more than that. And the whole idea of these town hall meetings was to bring government to the people. Because if you remember, our town hall meetings were televised live. We chose topics, and the ministers in charge of infrastructure, such as housing, power, water, would come to meet and speak to Nigerians, and Nigerians will speak back to them, and they will now take those feedback to government. So really, you're correct. People, they are the central reason why there's a government, and there's a central reason for communication. You spoke about national orientation. Again, if you read this book, it's there. Because one of the first things we did as a government was to start a very ambitious campaign because we believe that this country needed a national rebirth. And we said this change begins with me. When you read this book, you will know how it was killed and how it was stifled. Yes, so yes, it's true. And you talk about, yes, I was, the portfolio of tourism and culture was under me. You are right. But it's the kind of reforms we brought to culture and tourism that, and our advocacy that allowed us to be the country to lead the repatriation of the largest amount of artifacts in the world. When we went to sign for the repatriation of 1,130 stolen artifacts from Nigeria. Again, the details are in this book.
As an information manager at that level, how do you reconcile certain situations? Let's say, for instance, a good product sells itself, but sometimes there are bitter pills which are not easily sellable. Sometimes decisions, policies are made which the people who it's all about might disagree with, but it is still the job of the information manager to put these across. How did you get about doing this?
Well, like the title of my book said, media interventions, media moments rather, that shaped an administration. So we use the media as a tool to make sweet to the people what you call the bitter pill, either in terms of what I've just described as various town hall meetings, or in terms of press conferences. I remember we used to have every fortnight a meeting with the bureau chiefs. And at those meetings, we explained to the bureau chiefs certain things which are not meant for publication, but for their own contextual understanding and background. We also sometimes have to travel outside the country to explain certain concepts which are being misunderstood by international community, such as herdsmen farmers clashes, banditry, Boko Haram, IPOB, even the last 2023 elections. We went there and we gave them context, made them understand. Because I realized that when I was in the US and the UK, the people who were commenting most about our elections knew little or nothing about our constitution. They knew only what was put on the social media. They did not understand that under our constitution, to be declared a president, not only must you win the plurality of votes cast, but you must also score 1/4 of total votes cast in at least 2/3 of the state of the federation. In the last election, nobody in the opposition scored more than 21. Abubakar Atiku scored 21. Obi scored 15. So even if they had the plurality of votes, they could not have become president. But this was not known to many of them in the diaspora. So we had to explain to them. So, and this is kind of, tools we used, to push the narrative of government. So, yes, we also did what we call, scorecard series. Some of fact, I remember we also had this program where people call it, testimony series, where we brought together people who had benefited from government policies, such as the conditional cash transfer, such as the one-day meal for students, such as the loans from BOI, so that let the people know what we have done. So there are many tools that we used to bring to bring the government to the people and also the people to government.
Let me go back to what you just mentioned a few moments ago. You held meetings with media executives and you disclosed certain things that were not meant for public consumption, on the understanding that they would use that knowledge to present a good picture. So the challenge of that is, how do you determine what to hold back and what to give out?
Sincerely, we went for that serial. Every month, we met with editors, title editors. It was coordinated by Ministry of Information, the two presidential aides to Mr. President, the Minister of Defense, the IGP, the DGS, the Director of State Service, the NIA, all the information, all the security apparatus, from NIA to NSA to the military to the police. And we met every month with title editors, with CEOs of television stations and radio stations, and we gave them a scorecard of how well we were doing in the fight against insecurity, but it was meant not to be published. And to the credit of this gentleman, only one person in about 3 years broke that arrangement. So I have a lot of confidence in the title editors. We discussed with them freely. We gave information that we could not give to outsiders, and they respected our views. But it helped them, because when they were now writing the editorials, and they were commenting at the background, they understood all this.
Wouldn't that amount to hoarding of useful information? I mean, how do you balance that with the rights of the people to know?
Cyril, see, above all, national security, national stability trumps everything. Me and you can start talking today of the right to know, the right to balance, because there is stability, there is peace. If we hear a blast here, me and you, we are going to run away from here. So the truth of the matter is that we try to impress on the media that national security trumps, sensationalism or headlines. It's because there's a country called Nigeria. That's why you can sell your newspapers, or you can come and advertise. And they understood that. I say to their credit. That's how we managed it.
Would it happen in carrying out this, duty of managing information, with all these things you've talked about being on the background, would it happen at any time that personal conviction was at war with the norm? For instance, you, not now as an information manager, as Alhaji Lai Mohammed, are strongly convinced that this piece of information would do good to the general public, but under the purview of managing an information, you might not have to disclose. Did you ever find yourself at a crossroads of what to do?
It's Cyril, it's a pity that you are not addressing the book I've come to
Because all that would be in your book anyway.
Right. But you see, exactly what you are saying is here.
Right.
On 2 occasions, I had to take decisions at personal cost. I don't want to start disclosing what's in this book, but I'll tell you that there are instances, for instance, as a means of information, that I felt like resigning. When my family actually held the meeting and asked me to resign, the details you'll find in this book. In other words, when you are at that level of government, you take decisions that will be very uncomfortable to you also, but in the overall interest of the country. Some decisions you take, even your children will oppose it, but they do not see the complete picture. And this is why I believe that this book is good for anybody who wants to understand what goes behind the headlines, what goes before the sound bites, how are decisions making, how does misinformation foreshadow them, what are the contextual history behind the headlines and the sound bites.
Let's go back a little bit. You had considerable experience managing information. You talked about FAN, the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria. You talked about being spokesperson for the opposition at one point in time. Perhaps at that time, you didn't have a vibrant and diverse and divergent media space as you do have today. You also talked about challenges with Twitter, for instance, when the headlines gave Nigeria bans Twitter. You have a media space that is wide-ranging in all manners. Access to information is real-time now. The traditional management methods certainly wouldn't do. So while managing all of this, I suppose you would have a part of this book where you talk about navigating through the maze of information and news channels that are largely unregulated.
Cyril, I was minister until about 2.5 years ago. So I was actually a minister at the height of social media explosion and AI. And it's on record that as a Minister of Information and Culture, I fought strenuously to regulate the social media. Not to stifle social media, but to regulate it. Probably, if I'd been more successful, but we wouldn't have the kind of problems we have today. Where today, anybody with access to data and a smartphone creates news, can set the whole country on fire. It's not today where people share news, information, without even checking the veracity of it. The traditional gatekeepers are gone. And it's going to get worse with AI. Yes, we foresaw this, and the whole chapter was dedicated to that in this particular book. Yes, we didn't see tomorrow, but we foresaw it was going to happen. It was, even as a minister, it was a constant battle to navigate that milieu. We had to work together with not just my ministry, even National Communication Commission at critical moments of national emergencies. Because at critical moments of national emergency, the information manager is at the front of it.
The information manager sees a need to cut down on the powers of information channels. Isn't there a conflict there?
You said the information manager
sees a reason to cut down on the activities of an information channel. Is there a conflict there?
No. You see, no information manager can succeed without a thorough understanding of the media space. And he needs to carry the media along. And in my experience of 8 years of information and culture, my greatest allies were the media. Because all you needed to do was to be transparent to them. And they understood. And they still understood that, look, we're all Nigerians. And nobody is going to build this country. So, fake news, misinformation, they have caused wars, are still causing wars. And this is why we kept saying we had no intention to stifle the media. That's true that, like it was said at the IPR conference, Nigeria, you cannot even stifle the media in Nigeria. I don't want to start. But we want responsible, patriotic journalism. And this is why I think, by and large, I must give credit to the Nigerian, at least the major, not just the traditional, media. Apart from people with, ulterior motives who are chasing followership, they are chasing clicks, who are chasing, deadlines. When you look at it, 40% of what we are fed today online is false news, it's fake news, it's destabilizing news.
All right. Well, at this point in time, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll look at other aspects of the book, Headlines and Soundbites, Media Moments That Defined an Administration. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Why should we be in a difficult situation financially?
Once upon a time we were rich, but we're not a rich country anymore.
Disaster management is everybody's business.
In all these times, the organization turned to Nigeria.
We would as much want to harness the capacity that is within us so that we see how we can become self-reliant.
1 month ended and he said, we are increasing warning strike by 2 months. I mean, you are incubating madness. Even if these are officials of government who have been told to go and enforce the law and they have gone against the law itself, they must be held accountable.
One-on-One, Friday, 10:30 p.m. on NTA Network. Thanks for staying with us. I'm still here with the former Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. In this second part, we intend to look at some of the other aspects of this book he has written, Headlines and Soundbites, Media Moments that Defined an Administration. Well, easily you say this is not just a documentation of an administration's media moments, but also, in your words, an enduring reflection on leadership, loyalty, public service, and the importance of shaping one's own narrative for posterity. How so the question of loyalty? Who were those who were an inspiration to you as a manager of information, as to see that loyalty is all part of this?
Well, when I started writing this book, Serial, in June this year, the late president was still alive.
That's Muhammad Buhari.
Muhammad Buhari. Then it was while I was writing this book that he passed on, precisely July 13th. Because he was a mentor to me, he was a leader to me, and he was a friend. I was shattered, naturally. And I could not continue writing the book. When I finally regained my composure, I had to dedicate a whole chapter to him. I sincerely wish I didn't have to do so, but God knows best. Now, reading that chapter, one will probably find out why that enduring tribute to him was necessary. Because he was a president that did not micromanage my ministry. I also, if you read this book, I said in 8 years as a minister, the President Muhammad Buhari called me only once to ask for a favor. And what was that favor? To represent him at the NIA. And because he couldn't make it, I should go and please represent him. Again, I do not want to, spoil this book for those who will read it. But you see, that is, I think, one of the, to me, it was a personal loss. Now, you talk about loyalty. Of course, you have to be loyal to your boss. I don't see any other alternative. Being loyal to your boss does not mean being slavish. Because you have ample opportunity and channel to disagree with him privately, if you want to do so. I remember when my children came to me and said I had to resign as a Minister of Information and Culture because they were bullied on the internet. They were bullied online and offline during answers. Their businesses were boycotted. And I told them, I said, if you are receiving this kind of heat and you're asking me to resign, you can imagine how much heat the president is receiving. So for me, that was my compass.
Ajilai Mohammed, let's return to this matter of government communication. Many times the public views communication information from the government with suspicion, believing to a large extent that, just as we have agreed, there are certain aspects that would not be disclosed for security reasons and otherwise. And so the public tends to think perhaps what is happening is mere propaganda, a whitewash. How much do you agree with that or disagree?
You see, sir, like I said, I have been uniquely privileged to have worked from both sides of the coin. I've been in a position for 10 years where I documented daily the missteps of government, of their programs and policies, where I made it a duty to make life uncomfortable for the ruling government. But fortune smiled on me. The APC won. The president was magnanimous enough to make me a minister, and I was now on the other side of it.
All right. Then you face the kind of...
Exactly. And that's why I say, I mean, without being immodest, I'm the only person in Nigeria today who back to back was spokesperson for the opposition and spokesperson for government.
All
and
right.
this is what this book is all about.
So on that premise, you made life difficult for those who held sway.
Yes, and they made life difficult for me too.
Right. So they made life difficult for you as well when you were there. So would it be fair to say that sometimes it was, to a large extent, about destabilizing the one who is occupying the position, or it wouldn't be?
Look, as the opposition spokesperson, I had only one goal, and only one goal: demolish the government of the day and come to power. And in doing so, I had little or no understanding of national security, national stability, or other issues.
Then you got there and you saw those things from a different prism altogether.
They say you campaign in poetry, but you rule government in prose. So, like I said, there's probably no better person today in this country, and without sense of modesty. I've been there. I've put fire in my own too. But, and this is the, you see, why did I write this book? I wrote this book for posterity, to educate the public, and to inspire future leaders. I wrote this book to give context to government actions, to explain government actions. You don't have to agree with us, but you won't be able to fault our logic in what we did. I mean, look, Cyril, if there's a fire in your house today, you're not going to wait to find out the cause of the fire. You want to evacuate your children, you want to evacuate your wife and your property. Right? So, and that is the thing about government.
Okay. Which brings us to this next aspect of it, because I'm sure that for many people who would be reading this book, they would want to know a little bit from your experiences about managing information in a crisis situation, just like the analogy you give now. When there's fire, your first thought is to get out and escape with your life intact. So those who would have the privilege of reading this book will ask, in a national crisis situation, for instance, how do you manage information? And of course, you had quite a few while you were minister. You remember the SARS, which was a huge crisis, and some other issues like that, that almost pushed the country to the brink, and you had to manage. So for those who would be reading this, what would be their takeaways on how to manage information during crisis?
Well, the first thing in crisis management is integrity and transparency and knowledge. You must first understand the problem before you want to manage it. Now, as an information manager, you don't stay in your office and depend on what is happening outside and react to press releases. No. For you to manage information successfully, you must be in the center of it. One, you must be at the decision-making level. You must be ready to take risks. You must be innovative. You must be resourceful. When on the 5th of December 2015, I decided to take a trip to Maiduguri, Kondoga, Kauri, and Bama. It was for the purpose of information management. Because prior to that time, as a spokesperson for the opposition, I lambasted the Jonathan administration for the way they handled Boko Haram. So I became a minister, and they were now going to lambast me. So the first thing I did was go to the recovered territories, have first-hand information of what was happening, and change the narrative. So when I left on the 5th of December 2015, barely 3 weeks after I was sworn in as a minister, I left with a courtesy of international and local media. And this is what I talk about: transparency and integrity. I took them along. I said, come and see. Our soldiers said they have liberated Kondoga, Kauri, and Bama. Come and see for yourselves. So when we came back with the videos, audios, the whole world believed that indeed our military had recovered those territories, and that the narrative of the opposition that the Boko Haram was still in charge was false. And I remember when an opposition governor on my return said, no, it is not true. I told him, I have been there. You go there too and come back and tell the world what you have seen. Or you remember during the Bring Back Our Girls, we managed to convince the Bring Back Our Girls to accompany us to Yola. From Yola, we flew in Air Force sorties over Sambisa Forest for 2 nights consecutively, for them to see what efforts the military was making to bring back our girls. That's the way you win the confidence of the people. So when they came back, they issued a statement commending the Air Force component of the Army in their fight against terrorism. So, for you to be credible, you see, if you want to manage information, be credible. Have integrity. But above all, carry the media along. There was no major trip I went. Locally, either visiting industries, visiting Boko Haram, headquarters, or when the captured girls were kidnapped, I went with the media. We met the governor of Yobe State. We had first-hand information before all the other do-gooders were coming. So it's about how much you understand about information management. You see, you can't accuse me of propaganda. When I go on a trip and I take CNN, I take BBC, I take NTA, I take channels. Even if you say I'm going to, NTA is government news agency. What about channel? What about AIT? And I didn't discriminate. We brought equal number of private and government-owned media on all our trips. So that's one way you can manage information that people will know that it's not propaganda.
One bit that interests me, perhaps you had something to say about that too, in managing information, particularly in crisis situations, especially where you have loss of lives, unfortunately, and certain aspects are regarded as classified information, but you're dealing with a situation where you're managing fatalities, but individuals with access to information are flashing these.
You see, an information manager, to be successful, to be impactful, must work very closely with all the emergency agencies, NEMA, the military, the police, all security agencies. And you must always be one step ahead of the crowd. Remember, earlier on I told you that we used to meet with the media, with all the heads of security. In addition to that, as Minister of Information and Culture, I also coordinated a monthly meeting with my colleagues, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Police Affairs, the DGSSS, the NIA, where we also looked at security situations. These were not meant for publication, but it helped in getting a pulse on the level of insecurity. Now, most times people that go out, even in advanced countries, only authorized agencies are allowed to come out with casualties, number of dead, number of, number of people that got drowned. Because it is a coordinated work between the police, the military, the Red Cross, NEMA, and everybody. But unfortunately in Nigeria, some people will rush to the media and spread panic. Again, it's important that you manage this kind of crisis. Otherwise, you are going to spread panic, and before you know it, people will be on the street, they are looking for their children.
Well, I know you might not want to divulge or disclose specifics of the content of this book before the public presentation, but perhaps you could let us into what the defining moments were for you as a manager of government information at the national level, as Minister of Information, the longest serving for those 8 years, and the not so fulfilling aspects of that to person, to family, and belief.
Well, what you're going to find in this book will largely be how we were able to, revolutionalize project reporting to be turned into communication materials for campaigns. You will find, of course, tense moments in my career as a minister to a point where I almost resigned. You also find some of the very difficult decisions I had to make, which affected me personally, but for national security, I had to do. You also find how we were able to regain the long-lost glory of the National Theatre. It's a chapter. Our contribution to the efforts of P&ID that wanted to defraud Nigeria of $9.6 billion, you find there. Because like you find there, we said that issue of P&D was fought both in the court of law and the court of public opinion. And it's only when you get to this book, you find out what happened. What we did in the streets of London to sway public opinion in our favor and save Nigeria $9.6 billion. Of course, I must give credit to our lawyers too, But then I was convinced that this particular matter will be fought in two courts. One court of law, one court of public opinion. You also see in this book how we were able to bring advocacy upon and force Germany, or rather persuaded Germany to make the largest repatriation of stolen artifacts in the whole world. We also see in this book what role information played in validating the last election. Above all, because you're going to find in this book also my personal reflections on Mr. President, the late Muhammad Buhari. Yes, it's not just said. There are also some humorous moments. For instance, I remember in the early days when we were walking towards the merger.
All right.
I used to go to Kaduna with the president today, Chief Mohammed Tinubu, Chief Bisi Akande,
Okay.
and we used to go to President Muhammadu Buhari, was then General Muhammadu Buhari.
Right.
And incidentally, we used to go there only on Mondays and Thursdays. And I normally fast on Mondays and Thursdays. So every time he invited me to come and eat, I would decline. So one day, he asked Ashwad, he said, doesn't Lai trust me enough to eat in my house? And so I said, no, sir. He farts on Mondays and Thursdays.
Right. Okay.
Then Buhari looked at him and said, how many people have you killed that you are atoning for your sins?
Oh, well.
You know, that kind of, everybody, you know. So it is more of that. It's not all grim.
Okay, then. All right. Alhaji Lai Mohammed, it's been interesting talking to you. We look forward to the presentation of this book, Headlines and Sound Bites, Media Moments That Defined an Administration.
I think I would be remiss if I don't use the opportunity to let the world know that this book will be launched on December 17, 10 a.m. at the Musa Yar'Adua Center in Abuja.
All right.
And that we chose this date because it's posthumous birthday for President Muhammadu Buhari. If we were alive, we would have been 83 on that day.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. We want to thank you once again for coming on One on One, and we wish you well with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One on One. I am Cyril Stober. Bye for now.
Thank you.